The quarterly shareholders' meeting at Thompson Manufacturing was always held in the same sterile conference room on the 15th floor. Same mahogany table, same leather chairs, same view of the industrial district where Dad had built his empire over 30 years. And always the same seating arrangement. The board members around the table, Dad at the head as CEO, and me in the corner chair with my laptop taking minutes. Administrative assistant. They called my position, though I'd been doing it for 6 years now since graduating from Stanford with my MBA. Dad had insisted I learn the business from the ground up, before considering any real role in company operations. The ground up apparently meant taking notes and keeping quiet during important discussions. Today's meeting was particularly tense. Thompson Manufacturing was facing its biggest decision in decades: whether to accept a buyout offer from Meridian Industrial, a massive conglomerate that had been acquiring smaller manufacturing companies across the Midwest. "The offer is substantial," announced Robert Chin, the board chairman and Dad's oldest business partner. "Meridian is proposing $450 million for full acquisition." Board member Patricia Williams leaned forward. "That's almost triple our current valuation. It's hard to ignore numbers like that." James Peterson, Dad's golfing buddy who'd been on the board for 15 years, nodded enthusiastically. "We'd all walk away wealthy. Very wealthy." Dad, however, looked unconvinced. At 62, Thomas Thompson was still the formidable presence who'd built this company from a single machine shop into a major regional manufacturer. His thick gray hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit impeccable, and his expression skeptical. "Meridian has a reputation for gutting the companies they acquire," he said firmly. "They'll keep the contracts and the equipment, but they'll eliminate jobs. Half our workforce would be gone within a year." "That's business, Tom," Peterson replied. "We can't run a company based on sentiment." "It's not sentiment, it's strategy," Dad countered. "We've built something sustainable here. Thompson Manufacturing has been profitable for 28 consecutive years because we maintain quality and treat our people well." I continued typing, documenting every exchange while staying invisible in my corner. This was familiar territory: Dad's principled stance against what he saw as corporate raiders, the board's growing interest in cashing out, the tension between legacy and profit. What they didn't know was that I'd been analyzing Meridian Industrial for months. Not officially, of course. Nobody had asked the administrative assistant for strategic analysis. But I'd studied their acquisition patterns, financial statements, and post-merger performance data. Dad's instincts were correct. Meridian typically eliminated 30 to 40% of acquired workforce within 18 months while extracting maximum short-term value. "The question," Robert Chin continued, "is whether we want to remain a family business with limited growth potential, or take this opportunity to maximize shareholder value." Dad's jaw tightened. "Limited growth potential? We've expanded our market share by 12% in the last 2 years. Regional market share," Williams corrected. "Meridian offers national distribution, international contracts, economies of scale we could never achieve independently. At the cost of our independence and our workers' jobs." Peterson spread his hands diplomatically. "Tom, I understand the emotional attachment. You built this company. But we have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. $450 million is more money than most of us ever dreamed of." That's when Dad made the mistake that would change everything. He stood up, commanding the room's attention with the authority that had made him successful for 3 decades. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Gentlemen," he began, then paused and glanced at Williams. "And lady, this decision requires serious business analysis, not emotional reactions to dollar signs. We need to think like experienced executives, not amateur investors." The room fell silent, waiting for his conclusion. "Some of you might be swayed by Meridian's offer because it seems like easy money. But real business decisions require understanding market dynamics, competitive positioning, long-term value creation." His eyes swept the room with obvious confidence. "These are complex concepts that require years of operational experience to fully grasp." Then he looked directly at me, sitting quietly with my laptop, and delivered the words that would end his control of the company he'd spent 30 years building. "Leave business to the men," he declared with absolute authority. "Women don't understand manufacturing." The board members chuckled, a mixture of nervous agreement and habitual deference to Dad's pronouncements. Even Williams, the only other woman in the room, managed a tight smile that suggested she'd learned to pick her battles carefully. I sat quietly, fingers poised over my keyboard, and continued taking notes. The meeting progressed through financial reports, operational updates, and preliminary voting procedures. Dad outlined his vision for continued independence, emphasizing employee loyalty, community relationships, and sustainable growth. It was a compelling presentation, delivered with the passion and expertise that had made him successful. The board listened respectfully, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely torn between sentiment and profit. What none of them realized was that Dad had just made the most expensive comment of his career. When the formal meeting concluded 2 hours later, board members began filing out, discussing dinner plans and golf schedules. Dad was gathering his papers, still confident in his ability to convince them that independence was the right choice. That's when Robert Chin approached my corner table, where I was closing my laptop and organizing my notes. "Miss Thompson," he said quietly, "could I speak with you for a moment?" I looked up, expecting some administrative request about meeting minutes or scheduling. "Of course, Mr. Chin." The remaining board members had paused their conversations, sensing something unusual in Chen's tone. Dad looked over with mild curiosity, probably wondering what administrative detail required the chairman's attention. Chen's next words changed everything. "As majority owner of Thompson Manufacturing," he said clearly, "what are your instructions regarding the Meridian Industrial Acquisition proposal?" The silence in that room was absolute. Dad's expression didn't just freeze, it shattered. The confident authority he'd displayed throughout the meeting disappeared, replaced by complete bewilderment. "Majority owner?" he repeated slowly. I closed my laptop and stood up, meeting Chen's eyes directly. "I'd like to schedule a special board meeting to discuss strategic alternatives. Meridian's offer deserves careful consideration, but we should explore all options before making a final decision." Peterson was looking back and forth between me and Dad like he was watching a tennis match played by invisible players. "I'm sorry, what's happening here?" Williams had gone pale. "Robert, what do you mean majority owner?" Chin opened his briefcase and removed a folder of documents. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe there's been some confusion about the company's ownership structure. Ms. Catherine Thompson currently holds 51% of Thompson Manufacturing's shares." Dad found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "That's impossible." "Actually, it's quite well documented," Chin replied, distributing copies of share certificates and transfer documents. The majority position was accumulated over 6 years through a series of carefully structured purchases. I watched Dad scanning the documents, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing comprehension. Each page confirmed what Chin was telling them. I owned controlling interest in Thompson Manufacturing. How? Dad managed. It was a fair question. How does an administrative assistant acquire 51% of a major manufacturing company without anyone noticing? The answer was simpler than they'd expect and more complex than they could imagine. It had started during my senior year at Stanford, when I'd written my MBA thesis on family business succession planning. My research had focused on companies where ownership and management became separated over time, often without founders realizing the shift was occurring. Thompson Manufacturing had been my case study. Dad had incorporated the company 30 years ago, issuing shares to raise capital for expansion. Over the decades, as the business grew and needed additional funding, he'd continued issuing stock to investors, banks, and business partners. The company had thrived, but Dad had gradually diluted his own ownership from 100% to about 35%. He'd never worried about maintaining majority control because the remaining shares were spread among dozens of small investors. No single entity held more than 3 or 4%. Dad controlled the board, ran daily operations, and made all strategic decisions. Majority ownership seemed irrelevant. What he hadn't anticipated was someone systematically acquiring those scattered minority positions. I'd started 6 years ago, immediately after joining the company. My first purchase had been a 2% stake from Mr. Anderson, a retiree who'd invested early and wanted to liquidate for his grandchildren's college funds. Then 3% from the Peterson Family Trust when James needed cash for his son's medical bills. 1% from former employee Sarah Martinez when she started her own business. Small transactions spread over years, purchased through a private investment entity I'd established. Never enough to trigger disclosure requirements or raise suspicions. Each seller was happy to get cash for shares in a regional manufacturing company they barely understood. By my third year at Thompson Manufacturing, I own 19%. By my fifth year, 42%. Last month, I'd purchased the final 9% from 3 different estate sales, pushing my holdings to 51%. Majority control of the company where I worked as an administrative assistant, taking notes and staying quiet during board meetings. The share purchases were all properly documented and filed, Chin continued, still addressing the stunned board members. Ms. Thompson has been the majority owner for approximately 6 weeks. Dad was staring at the documents like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Catherine, where did you get the money for this? Another fair question. Acquiring 51% of a company valued at $150 million required substantial capital, approximately $77 million over 6 years. I started with the trust fund Grandpa Thompson established, I explained. $22 million when I turned 25. I invested it carefully, focused on growth, and used the returns to fund additional investments. Dad's father had been a successful real estate developer who died when I was 15. His trust had been substantial, but everyone had assumed I'd use it for personal expenses rather than business acquisitions. The investment returns were sufficient to fund the share purchases, I continued, along with some leverage from banks that were happy to lend against Thompson Manufacturing equity. What I didn't mention was that my investment success had been exceptional. Starting with Grandpa's $22 million, I'd built a portfolio worth over $200 million. Thompson Manufacturing represented about 40% of my holdings. I'd learned from some of the best minds in business. Stanford professors, investment mentors, and 6 years of listening to board meetings where strategic decisions were discussed in detail. I'd understood market dynamics, competitive positioning, and long-term value creation before I'd ever set foot in Thompson Manufacturing. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Dad had been explaining that women didn't understand manufacturing, I'd been quietly acquiring his life's work. Peterson found his voice first. So when we vote on the Meridian acquisition, Ms. Thompson's 51% constitutes majority control, Chin confirmed. The decision is ultimately hers. Williams was studying the share certificates with professional interest. This is remarkable strategic planning. How long have you been working toward majority ownership? It wasn't originally the goal, I admitted. I started investing in the company because I believed in its long-term potential. The majority position was a natural result of continued acquisition over time. Dad was still processing, his expression cycling through emotions I'd never seen him display. Catherine, why didn't you tell me? I considered the question carefully. When would have been the appropriate time? During family dinners when you explained that I needed to learn the business from the ground up? During board meetings when you emphasized the importance of keeping family business decisions within appropriate hierarchies? Or perhaps during today's meeting, when you explained that women don't understand manufacturing? The board members were exchanging glances that suggested they were recalculating everything they thought they knew about Thompson Manufacturing's power structure. Chin cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should schedule a special meeting to discuss the Meridian proposal in light of this new information? Agreed, I said. I'd also like to review our current strategic plan, market positioning, and growth opportunities. There may be alternatives to acquisition that we haven't fully explored. Dad was gathering his papers with movements that seemed automatic, his mind clearly elsewhere. Catherine, we need to talk. Privately. Of course. But first, I'd like to make sure everyone understands the immediate situation. I looked around the table at faces that ranged from shocked to calculating to genuinely curious. I have no intention of making dramatic changes to company operations. Dad has built something remarkable here, and I respect both his expertise and his vision. But, Peterson prompted, sensing there was more. But strategic decisions going forward will be made collaboratively, with input from all stakeholders, including perspectives that might not have been considered in previous discussions. Williams was smiling now, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all afternoon. Including perspectives from women who allegedly don't understand manufacturing? I returned her smile. Among others. The meeting broke up with arrangements for a follow-up session the next week. Board members left in small groups, their conversations urgent and speculative. Chin lingered to discuss administrative details and transition procedures. Finally, Dad and I were alone in the conference room where I'd spent 6 years taking notes and staying quiet. Majority owner, he said, testing the words. 51%, I confirmed. And you never mentioned this because? I looked out the window at the factory floor below, where 237 people worked jobs that Dad had created and I now controlled. Because every time I've tried to contribute to strategic discussions, I've been reminded that my role is administrative support, not business leadership. Dad followed my gaze to the manufacturing floor. I was protecting you. This industry is tough, demanding. I wanted you to understand the challenges before taking on real responsibility. I've been studying the challenges for 6 years. Market analysis, competitive intelligence, operational efficiency, workforce management. I understand them quite well. By taking notes in meetings, I turned back to face him. By listening carefully, asking the right questions and doing considerable research on my own time. Also by acquiring first-hand experience with strategic investment, capital allocation and business development. Dad was quiet for a long moment, processing implications that extended far beyond corporate ownership. $200 million portfolio? Approximately. At 31 years old? 28 when I started with Grandpa's trust fund. It's been a learning experience. He laughed suddenly, a sound that mixed admiration with disbelief. You've been sitting in meetings letting me explain basic business concepts while you controlled my company. I've been listening to your explanations and learning from your expertise while building complementary skills you weren't aware I possessed. Dad shook his head slowly. What happens now? It was the right question. What did happen when the administrative assistant turned out to be the majority owner? When the daughter who'd been learning the business from the ground up was revealed to already be at the top. Now we work together, I said. You have operational expertise I need. I have strategic resources you can use. Meridian's offer is interesting, but it's not our only option. What other options? I opened my laptop and pulled up a presentation I'd been developing for months, waiting for the right moment to share it. Regional expansion, international partnerships, vertical integration opportunities. Thompson Manufacturing is positioned for significant growth, but it requires capital investment and strategic vision. Dad looked at the first slide, then at me. You've been planning this. I've been preparing for opportunities. Today's meeting created one. Over the next 2 hours, I walked Dad through a comprehensive growth strategy that would double Thompson Manufacturing's revenue within 5 years while maintaining the workforce stability and quality standards he valued. It was ambitious, well-researched, and entirely feasible with proper funding and execution. By the time we finished, Dad was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not the protective paternalism that had defined our relationship for 6 years, but genuine professional respect. When did you become smarter than me? He asked. I didn't. I became differently smart than you expected. Dad gathered his papers one more time, but his movements were thoughtful rather than automatic. The board meeting next week is going to be interesting. Very. And the Meridian decision? I closed my laptop, considering the question that would define Thompson Manufacturing's future. We'll evaluate all options objectively and make the choice that's best for stakeholders. All stakeholders. Including the 237 people on the factory floor? Especially them. Walking to the parking garage, I reflected on the afternoon's revelation. 6 years of careful planning had culminated in a moment that changed everything in nothing. I was still Catherine Thompson, still committed to the company's success, still respectful of Dad's expertise. But I was no longer the quiet administrative assistant taking notes in the corner. I was the majority owner with 51% control and a $200 million investment portfolio, ready to prove that women could understand manufacturing quite well when given the opportunity. Sometimes the best business strategy was patience. And sometimes, it was simply refusing to accept other people's limitations on your potential. The next board meeting was going to be very different indeed.
Just leave quietly and no one gets hurt, Amber said, blocking my way to the kitchen door. She tapped her nails on the counter, my counter, while wearing my husband's favorite perfume. I took a sip of coffee, hiding the fact that my hands were shaking. Are you threatening me in my own house, Amber? Don't be dramatic, Olivia. David and I love each other. He's been unhappy with you for years. Why make this messy? Just pack up and go. No lawyers, no fights. You can even keep your car. How generous. I'm Olivia Chin, 34 years old, and I was watching my husband's 26-year-old mistress try to push me out of my home. The home I had spent years fixing while David was working late, which I now knew meant cheating. I looked up at the ceiling fan I installed last summer. More importantly, at the tiny red light blinking on it. Amber noticed and frowned. "What are you looking at?" she asked, her confidence slipping. "Oh, nothing," I said, standing up. "Just admiring my work. Did David ever tell you I'm good with electronics?" Before she could reply, I heard the front door open. David's voice rang out. "Amber, is she giving you trouble?" He walked in, still wearing his wedding ring. "Perfect timing," I said, smiling and pulling out my phone. "We were just talking about home improvements." David's eyes narrowed. He knew that smile. I had the same one when I caught him texting Amber at 2 a.m. "What are you up to, Olivia?" "Just watching some videos." I turned my phone around, showing them live footage from the ceiling fan camera. Their faces went pale. "You recorded us?" Amber shrieked. "That's illegal." "In my own house? After you sent me threats?" I swiped to show her email where she explained how they planned to kick me out. "My lawyer says otherwise." David stepped forward, trying to act calm. "Let's be reasonable." "Oh, I have everything," I interrupted. "Every plan, every secret, every lie. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself?" The blinking light on the fan seemed to mock them. They had no idea it was just the beginning. "Delete it," David demanded. "Or what?" I asked. "You'll take everything from me? Leave me with nothing but my car?" I laughed and they flinched. "Check your email, David. You'll find some interesting footage. The police will too." Amber panicked first. She grabbed her purse and turned to David. "You said she would just leave." David lunged for my phone. "Give me that." I stepped back, still smiling. "The ceiling fan isn't the only camera, David. Every time you threaten me, I add more to the evidence." His hand froze mid-air. He looked around the kitchen, suddenly unsure. "How many cameras? Where were they?" "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice shook. "Check your email," I repeated. "Oh, and that Rolex you bought Amber with our joint account. The one you told me you lost? There's footage of that too." They stood there, trapped between fighting and running. "This isn't over," David muttered. "You're right," I said, sipping my coffee. "It's just beginning. My lawyer and the police will be here soon." They ran. No grand exit, just two people realizing their plan had failed. As the front door slammed, I forwarded the footage to my lawyer. A moment later, a text arrived. "Received. Meeting with police at 2 p.m. Well done, Olivia." I smiled at the blinking red light. Sometimes the best way to win isn't to fight, it's to be prepared. And I had been ready for this moment for months. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. David's family, his friends, even Amber's mother, everyone had an opinion about the footage that was now evidence in a criminal investigation. "You've ruined my daughter's career." Amber's mother screeched through the phone. "Those recordings could destroy her future. Your daughter ruined her own career when she decided to help my husband embezzle money." I replied calmly before hanging up. I was in my home office, reviewing security footage with Detective Martinez. She paused the video, showing David and Amber hunched over our desktop computer late one night. "There," I pointed. "That's when they were transferring money from our joint investment account. They thought using my computer would hide their tracks." Detective Martinez nodded, making notes. "And you installed the cameras after receiving the first threatening email." "Yes." Amber wasn't as careful as she thought. She used her work email to send me a friendly warning about leaving quietly. Said it would be a shame if something happened to all my property while I was gone. The detective's lips tightened. Textbook intimidation. And this was before they started moving money. They got bolder after I didn't respond to the threats. Started small jewelry disappearing, documents going missing. Then last month, I noticed large transfers from our accounts. My lawyer, Sarah, walked in with fresh coffee and a thick folder. "The bank statements confirm everything, Detective. Multiple unauthorized transfers totaling over $200,000. All captured on Olivia's cameras." I took a sip of coffee, remembering the night I discovered the first transfer. I've been reviewing our monthly statements, something David always mocked me for, when I noticed the discrepancy. That same evening, I caught him on camera assuring Amber they'd never get caught. "You'll get your dream house," he promised her, sitting at my kitchen counter. "Once we clear out the accounts and force Olivia out, everything will be perfect." Perfect. The word echoed in my mind as I watched them plot to destroy my life. My phone buzzed again. David this time. I showed the screen to Detective Martinez before answering on speaker. "Olivia." His voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk. What you're doing, it's not too late to fix this." "Fix what, David? The money you stole? The threats? The conspiracy charges?" "Don't be dramatic. I was going to pay it back. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." Sarah leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, this is Sarah Williams, your wife's attorney. Any further communication needs to go through me." "You hired a lawyer?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "After everything we discussed about keeping things simple." "You mean after you and Amber decided I should leave with nothing?" I kept my voice steady. The cameras caught that conversation too. Silence on his end. "Then, those recordings won't hold up. You can't just spy on people. In her own home? After documented threats?" Detective Martinez cut in. "Mr. Chen, this is Detective Martinez. I suggest you get a lawyer, a good one." The call ended abruptly. I could almost see David's face, that familiar mix of anger and panic when things didn't go his way. "He'll try something else," I said, turning to Sarah. "He always does when he's cornered." As if on cue, my phone lit up with a text from my neighbor. "2 people just went into your backyard, called the police." I switched to the live security feed on my phone. There they were, David and Amber, trying to get into the back door, probably hoping to remove the cameras, destroy evidence. Well, Detective Martinez stood up, already calling for backup. "Looks like we can add breaking and entering to the charges." I watched through the cameras as police cars silently pulled up to my house. David was still working on the door lock while Amber kept watch. They were so focused on getting in, they didn't notice the officers approaching until it was too late. The look on their faces when the police announced their presence, that moment of pure shock and realization, was captured perfectly by my cameras. More evidence, more charges. Sarah squeezed my shoulder as we watched them being led away in handcuffs. "You okay?" I nodded, feeling strangely calm. "You know what's funny? All those times David called me paranoid for wanting security cameras. Said I was wasting money, being obsessive. Turns out being careful isn't such a bad thing." "Being careful saved everything," she corrected. "The footage, the bank statements, the emails, you've built an airtight case. They won't get away with any of it." Detective Martinez returned looking satisfied. "They're both in custody. We found lockpicking tools and some kind of device they plan to use on your cameras. Premeditated, documented attempted break-in while under investigation. The DA is going to love this." I thought about David sitting in a jail cell, probably still wondering how his perfect plan had fallen apart. How his quiet, agreeable wife had outmaneuvered him at every turn. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Sarah smiled. "Now we make sure they face consequences for every single thing they did. And believe me, the list is getting longer by the hour." I looked around my office, my home, everything they tried to take from me. The cameras were still recording, silent witnesses to the end of David's schemes. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Amber. "I'm sorry, I'll tell them everything." Too little, too late. But then again, the cameras had already caught everything anyway. 6 months after David and Amber's arrest, I sat in a courthouse listening to their sentencing. The judge's words echoed through the quiet room. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming," she stated, looking down at David and Amber. "Conspiracy, attempted theft, financial fraud, breaking and entering, and intimidation. The calculated nature of these crimes is particularly disturbing." I watched David in his ill-fitting suit, so different from his usual polished appearance. Amber sat beside him, tears streaming down her face. Neither would look at me. "Mr. Chen, you're sentenced to 4 years in prison. Ms. Walker, 2 years with possibility of parole. Additionally, you'll both be required to pay full restitution." As they were led away, David finally turned to me. The anger in his eyes had been replaced by something else. Defeat. He'd lost everything. His job, his reputation, and his freedom. The prestigious accounting firm he worked for had fired him immediately after his arrest. No one wanted a financial advisor who stole from his own wife. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras, real ones this time. Sarah handled them expertly. This case shows that domestic financial abuse is a serious crime, she told them. Thanks to Mrs. Chen's foresight in documenting everything, justice was served. My phone buzzed with a message from Detective Martinez. Thought you'd want to know. They found more victims. Other women David scammed. Your cameras helped build those cases too. Later that evening, I hosted a small gathering at my house. The same kitchen where Amber had tried to intimidate me now filled with the people who'd helped me through everything. Sarah, Detective Martinez, my neighbors who'd called the police that day. To Olivia, Sarah raised her glass. Who proved that the best revenge is being smarter than your enemies. I smiled, thinking of the cameras still quietly watching over my home. I decided to keep them, not out of fear, but as a reminder. Sometimes the best protection is simply paying attention. You know what David said in his final statement to the judge? Detective Martinez asked, sipping her wine. He claimed he never thought you'd fight back. Said you were always so agreeable, so trusting. That was his mistake, I replied. He thought quiet meant weak. He never understood that trust should be earned, not taken for granted. The doorbell rang. Another delivery. Since the story hit the news, I've been receiving letters from women in similar situations asking for advice. My security cameras had inspired them to protect themselves too. Sarah picked up one of the letters. Have you thought about what you'll do next? Your story could help a lot of people. I had thought about it. The last 6 months had changed me. I wasn't just a survivor of David's schemes. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to help others. Actually, I said, I'm starting a consulting business, teaching women about financial security, documentation, protecting themselves. Turns out there's a real need for it. From victim to advocate, Detective Martinez nodded approvingly. Perfect. As my friends chatted and laughed, I looked up at the ceiling fan, the first camera that had changed everything. Its red light still blinked steadily, but it no longer represented fear or betrayal. Now it was a symbol of empowerment. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Chen, I'm one of the women your ex-husband scammed. Thank you for stopping him. You've given us all hope. I smiled, typing back, stay strong. Document everything. And never let anyone tell you to leave quietly. The cameras caught this moment too, me surrounded by friends, building a new life from the ashes of David's betrayal. But this footage wasn't evidence of crimes. It was proof that sometimes the happiest endings come after you stand your ground. Sarah raised her glass again. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, we echoed, and to security cameras. Laughter filled my kitchen, replacing the memories of threats and schemes. David and Amber were facing justice, and I was free to write my own next chapter. Sometimes the best revenge isn't running away. It's standing your ground and letting the truth speak for itself. One video frame at a time. Get out. You don't belong here anymore. Marcus shouted, throwing another box of my things onto the lawn. I stood still, watching my childhood photos scatter across the grass, trying not to cry. My name is Olivia. At 29, my own brother was kicking me out of the house where we grew up. Our grandma, Elena, had raised us here after our parents died in a car accident. This was the house where she taught me to bake apple pie, where she helped me walk again after my own accident. Marcus, please, I said, my hands shaking. Grandma left this house to both of us. You can't just. Can't what? He smirked, tossing more of my stuff. I deserve this house. I have a future. You just paint and teach kids. What a waste. I watched as he went back inside, probably to find more things to throw out. The morning sun cast shadows over the lawn, making his mess even clearer. Books, art supplies, old photo albums, all scattered like fallen leaves. Just 3 weeks ago, we stood in the same yard for Grandma's funeral. Marcus had acted like he cared, telling everyone he would honor her memory. But now, he was trying to take everything for himself. He came back holding a small wooden box. My heart sank. Recognize this, he mocked. Your precious art supplies. Guess you can buy new ones with your little teacher salary. That box held the watercolor set Grandma gave me on my 16th birthday, the same day I walked again after months of therapy. Those were Grandma's, I whispered, something shifting inside me. Well, now they're mine, he said, tucking it under his arm. Like everything else. I could have argued, could have yelled, but Grandma had taught me patience. I took a deep breath. You know what, Marcus? Keep them, I said, surprising even myself. What? He looked confused, expecting a fight. Keep everything. You need it more than I do. I started picking up what I could and loading my car. But remember what Grandma always said, the truth always comes out, like cream rising to the top. His smirk faded. Don't quote her to me. You think you were special. You were just her charity case after the accident. The words hurt, but I didn't let him see it. Instead, I thought about my last conversation with Grandma, about what she showed me, something Marcus didn't know about. By the afternoon, I had packed what I could. As I walked through the garden one last time, touching the roses Grandma loved, I saw Marcus watching me from the window. He thought he had won. He had no idea. Goodbye, Marcus, I called out. I hope the house brings you everything you deserve. He didn't answer, just shut the curtains. A few blocks away, I pulled over and took out my phone. Mr. Bennett, it's Olivia. Yes, I think it's time to look at those papers Grandma left with you. No, Marcus doesn't know. She said we'd know when the right time was. I think that time is now. As I hung up, I smiled. Marcus thought he had taken everything. But Grandma had seen this coming. And in 3 months, when the real will was read, he would learn the truth. Patience, after all, was the best revenge. The next 3 months passed like a slow-moving river, each day bringing me closer to the moment Grandma Elena had prepared for. I found a cozy studio apartment across town, threw myself into teaching art at the community center, and waited. Through the grapevine, I heard about Marcus's renovations to our family home. He'd torn out Grandma's beloved rose garden to install a modern patio, replaced the vintage stained glass windows with standard panes, and painted over the hand-stenciled walls she'd spent years perfecting. Each change felt like a personal attack on her memory. Mrs. Patterson kept me updated, her weekly calls filled with barely contained outrage. You won't believe what your brother did now, she'd say, detailing Marcus's latest attempts to erase Grandma Elena's touch from the house. He's even talking about selling her antique furniture to buy modern pieces. I listened patiently, knowing that each change Marcus made was another nail in his own coffin. What he didn't know was that Grandma Elena had documented everything in that house, from the original blueprints to the historical significance of each architectural detail. One morning, exactly 2 months after Marcus had thrown me out, I received an unexpected visit at the community center. Miss Winters, one of my young art students, tugged at my sleeve. There's a man here to see you. He says he's your brother. I found Marcus waiting in the hallway, looking uncomfortable among the children's artwork displayed on the walls. His usual confident demeanor seemed slightly frayed around the edges. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He shifted, glancing around before speaking. I need Grandma's recipe box. The one with her apple pie recipe. Some historical society is doing a feature on the house, and they want to include traditional family recipes. I almost laughed at the irony. The recipe box you threw out with my things? I didn't. He paused, realization dawning. It was in your stuff, along with many other things you didn't bother to check before tossing onto the lawn. I turned back to my classroom. Good luck with your interview. Olivia, wait, he called after me. Maybe we can work something out. I mean, you're still family, right? I stopped but didn't turn around. Now I'm family? What happened to being a charity case? His silence spoke volumes. I continued walking, leaving him standing there among the finger paintings and crayon drawings. He had no idea that the Historical Society's interest wasn't a coincidence. It was part of Grandma Elena's plan, set in motion by Mr. Bennett months ago. 2 weeks later, I received another call from Mrs. Patterson. Your brother had some visitors today, she said, barely containing her glee. Official-looking people with clipboards. They spent hours taking pictures and making notes. Marcus didn't look too happy when they left. I knew exactly who they were. The Historical Preservation Society had finally begun their assessment of the house. Another piece of Grandma Elena's puzzle falling into place. The following days brought a flurry of activity. Marcus started receiving letters about the house's historical status. about violations of preservation codes, about the necessity of restoring certain features he'd removed. Each morning seemed to bring a new official to his door. He tried calling me several times, but I let the calls go to voicemail. His messages grew increasingly desperate. "Olivia, these people are saying I needed permits to make changes. They're talking about fines. Did you know anything about this?" I deleted each message without responding. Grandma Elena had always said timing was everything, and now wasn't the time to reveal my hand. A week before the real will reading, I visited Mr. Bennett's office to review the documents one final time. As we sat in his wood-paneled office, he spread out the papers Grandma Elena had left in his care. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he said, adjusting his glasses. "She knew exactly how this would play out. The Historical Society registration, the preservation requirements, even Marcus's likely reactions, she predicted it all." I nodded, remembering that last afternoon in Grandma's study. She'd shown me the true will, explained her plans, and made me promise to wait for the right moment. "Marcus needs to learn a lesson," she'd said, her eyes sharp despite her illness. "About family, about heritage, about what really matters. Are all the pieces in place?" I asked Mr. Bennett. He smiled, patting the folder in front of him. "Everything's ready. The Historical Society's report is complete. The preservation orders are filed, and the property's heritage status is officially registered. Your brother's recent changes have only strengthened our position." As I left his office, I felt a mix of emotions. This wasn't about revenge. Grandma Elena had been clear about that. This was about justice, about preserving what mattered, and about teaching Marcus the lesson he'd needed to learn since we were children. That evening, as I sorted through the few photographs I'd managed to save, I found one of all of us in the garden. Grandma Elena, Marcus, and me, taken just after my recovery. We were all smiling, surrounded by her roses, the stained glass windows catching the sunset behind us. Soon, Marcus would understand exactly what he'd thrown away, and more importantly, what Grandma Elena had tried to protect. The real will reading was scheduled for tomorrow morning. In less than 24 hours, Marcus would learn that sometimes what you think you deserve isn't what you get, and what you cast aside might be worth more than you ever imagined. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear. I arrived at Mr. Bennett's office early, watching through the window as Marcus pulled up in his luxury car, looking considerably less confident than the last time I'd seen him. "Olivia?" He stopped short when he saw me in the waiting room. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Mr. Bennett opened his office door. "Please come in, both of you. We have some important matters to discuss." Marcus sat as far from me as possible, his jaw tense. "I don't understand. We already had the will reading 3 months ago." "That was the preliminary will," Mr. Bennett explained, pulling out a thick folder. "Your grandmother left explicit instructions about when the full will should be revealed." I watched as Mr. Bennett laid out the documents one by one. The house's historical registration papers, the preservation orders, and finally, Grandma Elena's true will. "What is all this?" Marcus demanded, his face paling as he scanned the papers. "Your grandmother registered the house as a historical landmark 6 months before her passing," Mr. Bennett explained. "All modifications must be approved by the Historical Preservation Society. The recent unauthorized changes you've made have resulted in significant fines." Marcus slumped in his chair. But I own the house now. I can do what I want with it." "Actually," Mr. Bennett continued, "according to your grandmother's full will, the house belongs to both you and Olivia, with conditions." He pulled out a letter written in Grandma Elena's familiar handwriting and began to read. "My dearest grandchildren, if this letter is being read, then my fears about how you would handle your inheritance have been confirmed. This house isn't just a property, it's our family's heart and history. Olivia understood this. Marcus, I hoped you would too. The house must be restored to its original condition, including the rose garden, stained glass windows, and all architectural details. Until this is done, neither of you can sell or modify the property further. More importantly, you must live there together for 1 year, sharing the space as I taught you to when you were children. If either of you refuses these terms, the house will be donated to the Historical Society and transformed into a public museum. Remember what I always told you, family isn't about what we own, it's about how we care for each other. Love, Grandma Elena." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the letter, then at me, realization dawning on his face. "You knew about this," he said quietly. "That's why you left so calmly." I nodded. "Grandma showed me the real will before she passed. She knew you might try to claim everything for yourself, but she also believed you could learn from it." "The renovation costs," Marcus whispered, looking shell-shocked, "will be covered by Grandma's secret restoration fund." Mr. Bennett interjected, "But only if you both agree to her terms." Marcus turned to me, and for the first time in years, I saw my brother instead of a competitor. "I've really messed up, haven't I?" "Yes," I said softly, "but it's not too late to fix it." Over the next few weeks, we began the process of restoring Grandma Elena's house. Marcus hired craftsmen to recreate the stained glass windows, and I helped replant the rose garden using cuttings Mrs. Patterson had preserved. Slowly, the house began to feel like home again. Working together, we discovered papers and photos we'd never seen, each one revealing more about our grandmother's life and wisdom. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset through the newly restored windows, Marcus spoke. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I forgot what this place really meant, what family really means." I handed him a slice of apple pie, made from Grandma's recipe that Mrs. Patterson had thankfully saved a copy of. "Grandma used to say that sometimes we need to lose something to understand its true value." He smiled, taking a bite. "She also used to say that the best revenge is letting people realize their own mistakes." "This isn't about revenge," I replied, watching the last rays of sun paint the rose garden in golden light. "It's about remembering who we are and where we came from." As we sat there, sharing pie and memories, I could almost feel Grandma Elena's presence in the gentle evening breeze. She'd known all along that the house wasn't just a building. It was a bridge between past and future, between siblings who'd lost their way and needed to find it again. Sometimes the best endings aren't about winning or losing. They're about rediscovering what matters most. "Amanda, Sophia is moving in with us next week," Marcus said casually over dinner, as if it were nothing important. "It's time we all learned to live together." I put down my fork and stared at my husband of 8 years. He kept eating, acting like he hadn't just said something shocking. At 35, he was still as handsome as ever, but the smirk on his face was something new. "I must have misheard you," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. "Did you just say your mistress is moving in?" Marcus sighed, looking annoyed. "Don't be dramatic. Sophia isn't just my mistress, she's important to me now. And since you refuse to divorce me without taking half of everything, this is the solution." I thought about the security cameras I had installed 6 months ago. "And you expect me to be okay with this?" He laughed coldly. "Yes. You don't really have a choice. The house is in my name, I pay the bills, and you can't afford to leave. Sophia thinks this is a reasonable arrangement." Of course she did. She was only 24, fresh out of college, working at Marcus's law firm. She probably thought this situation was modern and exciting. "What makes you think I'll stay?" I asked, pushing my plate away. Marcus smiled. "Because you're practical, Amanda. That's why I married you. You know divorce would leave you with nothing, no house, no security. This way, you keep your comfortable life." I stood up and started clearing the table. "And what does Sophia's family think about this?" "They don't know yet," he admitted, checking his phone. "And they won't until we decide to tell them. Her parents are very traditional." I nodded. Traditional enough that this news might cause a scandal. I kept that in mind as I loaded the dishwasher. "When exactly is she moving in?" I asked. "Next Saturday," he said. "I expect you to help make her feel welcome, clear out some closet space, fix up the guest room." I thought about the USB drive in my desk, full of video footage from our security cameras, footage of Marcus and Sophia together in our home, discussing their plans, their future, and how they would push me out. "And if I refuse?" I asked. Marcus's expression darkened. "Then things will get very difficult for you. Accepting this is your best option." I smiled. "You're right, I am practical." I picked up his wine glass and walked to the kitchen. "I'll start on the guest room tomorrow." He chuckled. "See, I knew you'd be reasonable." If only he knew how reasonable I had been these past 6 months, gathering proof of his affair, saving money in a secret account, and hiring a private investigator. Later that night, as Marcus slept beside me, I reviewed the dinner footage. The hidden camera in a light fixture had captured everything perfectly: his smug attitude, his threats, his confidence that I would just accept his plan. I opened my laptop and started writing 2 emails. One was for Sophia's parents with video clips attached. The other was for Marcus's boss, who happened to be a close friend of my father. But I didn't send them yet. Timing was everything. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. I hope Marcus told you about the new arrangement. I'm really excited about this. I took a screenshot and added it to my file. Poor Sophia. She thought she was in control, but she had no idea that Marcus had done this before, or that I had been planning my own move. Unlike his last wife, I hadn't wasted time crying. I had prepared. Marcus was right. I was practical. And on Saturday, he and Sophia would find out just how practical I could be. For now, I would play along, letting them think they had won. After all, the best traps are the ones you don't see coming until it's too late. The week leading up to Sophia's planned move-in passed in a surreal blur. I watched Marcus excitedly prepare the guest room, buying new furniture and bedding that matched Sophia's aesthetic. He even had the audacity to ask my opinion on color schemes. The pale blue would suit her better than the gray. I suggested helpfully, knowing that every credit card charge was being documented, and maybe some new curtains to match. He beamed, completely missing the irony. See, I knew you'd come around. This can work if we all try. On Thursday, I overheard him on the phone with Sophia, his voice soft and intimate in a way it hadn't been with me in years. Baby, wait until you see what I've done with the room. Amanda's been surprisingly cooperative. She's even helping decorate. I smiled to myself as I added the recorded conversation to my growing collection. That evening, I met with my father's friend, Richard Thompson, the managing partner at Marcus's law firm. Are you sure about this timing? Richard asked, reviewing the documentation I brought. Once we move forward, there's no going back. I nodded, thinking of Marcus's smug certainty that I would simply accept his humiliation. I'm sure. Everything's in place. Richard studied the evidence, videos, text messages, credit card statements showing gifts and hotel stays, all meticulously dated and organized. Marcus always was ambitious, he mused. But this, involving a junior associate, planning to move her into your home, it's beyond unprofessional. The board meeting is next Friday, correct? I confirmed. Yes, when they'll be announcing partnership promotions. Richard's expression was grim. Marcus has been the front runner. Such a shame if something were to derail that. Friday evening, Marcus brought Sophia over to show her the renovated room. I heard their excited chatter and giggles floating up the stairs as I sat in my office, finalizing my preparations. Amanda? Marcus called out. Come down and say hello properly. I descended the stairs, finding them in the guest room. Sophia stood there, young and beautiful, wearing an expensive dress Marcus had probably bought her. She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Amanda, hi, she said brightly, as if we were meeting at a coffee shop rather than in the home I shared with her lover. The room looks amazing. Thank you for being so understanding about everything. I smiled warmly. Of course. We're all adults here, aren't we? Would you like some wine? We should celebrate. Marcus looked delighted by my suggestion. Soon we were sitting in the living room, an absurd parody of normalcy as they shared their plans for cohabitation. I'll keep my things in this side of the closet, Sophie explained, wine making her chatty. And maybe we could work out a schedule for the kitchen. Absolutely, I agreed, though I'm usually not home for dinner these days. Work keeps me busy. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Since when? Oh, I've taken on some new projects recently, I said vaguely. Speaking of which, Sophia, how are things at the firm? The partnership announcements are next week, aren't they? A shadow crossed Marcus's face. Let's not discuss work. But Sophia was already nodding enthusiastically. Marcus is definitely getting it. We've already started looking at houses in the better neighborhoods. Once he's partner, we won't have to live here anymore. I watched Marcus wince at her indiscretion. He hadn't wanted me to know about their future plans, probably worried I might cause trouble before his promotion was secure. How wonderful, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings. Later, after Sophia left, Marcus turned to me with unusual sincerity. Thank you for handling this so well. I know it's not ideal, but you've been surprisingly mature about everything. I touched his arm gently. We all make choices, Marcus. We just have to live with the consequences. He looked slightly unsettled by my response, but quickly shrugged it off. As he headed upstairs, I sent 2 emails I prepared earlier. The first to Sophia's parents, the second to the firm's board members. Then I called the locksmith I'd arranged and confirmed our appointment for tomorrow morning. Saturday dawned bright and clear. Marcus left early to help Sophia pack, promising they'd be back by noon. At 9 a.m., the locksmith arrived to change every lock in the house. By 10, the security company had updated all the codes. At 11, a moving company I'd hired arrived to remove everything Marcus had bought for Sophia's room. Right at noon, my phone started buzzing with messages. First from Sophia's mother, then her father. Next came a flood of emails from the law firm's board members. Finally, Marcus himself called, his voice tight with panic. "Amanda, what did you do?" I settled into my office chair, enjoying the morning sunlight streaming through the window. "I made a practical choice, darling, just like you taught me to." His next words came out as a snarl. "You had no right." "Actually, I had every right," I cut him off. "But we can discuss that when you get home." "Oh wait, your key won't work anymore." Funny how practical decisions can have such immediate consequences. I hung up, knowing this was just the beginning. But for the first time in months, I felt completely in control. Marcus had taught me well, sometimes the practical choice is the one that hurts the most. The fallout was spectacular and immediate. Sophia's parents, outraged by the video evidence of their daughter's affair with a married partner at her firm, pulled every string they had in their social circle. By Saturday evening, the scandal had spread through their country club faster than a summer wildfire. Marcus's phone calls became increasingly desperate as the hours passed. "You've ruined everything," he shouted in his last voicemail. "Is that what you wanted?" I didn't respond. Instead, I watched through the security cameras as he tried his key in the front door repeatedly, growing more frustrated with each attempt. Finally, he rang the doorbell. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "Can I help you?" "This is my house," he snarled, trying to push past me. "Actually," I held up a document. "The house is in both our names. Check the deed. And as a co-owner, I have every right to change the locks when I feel my safety is threatened." His face went pale. "What are you talking about? I never put your name on the deed." "No, you didn't. But your assistant did, 3 months ago, when you asked her to file some routine paperwork. You really should read what you're signing, Marcus." The realization hit him like a physical blow. I'd been preparing this moment for months, carefully orchestrating every detail while he was distracted with Sophia. "The partnership," he started. "Won't be happening," I finished. "The board wasn't thrilled about the videos of you promising promotions to a junior associate in exchange for personal favors. Apparently, that violates several ethical guidelines." Marcus slumped against the doorframe. "You recorded everything." "Of course I did. I learned from the best, remember? You always taught me to be practical." Just then, a car pulled up to our house. Sophia jumped out, her face streaked with tears. "Marcus, my parents know everything. They're threatening to report the firm to the ethics board if I don't quit immediately." I smiled pleasantly. "Oh good, you're both here. That saves me some time." I handed them each an envelope. "These are copies of everything I've documented over the past 6 months. Every conversation, every threat, every penny spent. I've already sent copies to the firm's board, Sophia's parents, and my lawyer." Sophia opened her envelope with trembling hands. You planned this?" "No, you both planned this." I corrected her. "I just made sure there was a record of everything. By the way, Sophia, those designer bags Marcus bought you. He used our joint credit card. I've reported them as fraudulent purchases." Marcus's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "You vindictive." "Careful," I warned. "The cameras are still recording." They stood there, these 2 people who had thought they could simply push me aside, looking lost and defeated. Sophia was the first to break, running back to her car in tears. Marcus watched her go, then turned back to me. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I want a divorce, Marcus. A fair division of assets, including the house you tried to keep from me. And I want you to remember something. You didn't lose everything because I was vindictive. You lost it because you were careless. Now, please leave before I call the police." I closed the door on his stunned face and walked to my office. There, I opened my laptop and smiled at the email that had just arrived. A job offer from a competing law firm. They were quite impressed with my attention to detail and strategic thinking. Over the next few weeks, the story unfolded exactly as I'd orchestrated. Marcus was asked to take an indefinite leave from the firm. Sophia resigned and moved back in with her parents. And I kept the house, started my new job, and finally redecorated the guest room the way I'd always wanted it. One evening, as I enjoyed a quiet dinner alone, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus's previous wife. "I heard what happened. I wish I'd been as smart as you." I thought about responding but decided against it. Instead, I raised my wine glass to the security camera in the corner, my silent witness through it all, and smiled. Sometimes the most practical solution isn't the easiest one, but it's always the most satisfying. 3 months later, I ran into Sophia at a coffee shop. She looked smaller somehow, less confident in her designer clothes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I don't know what I thought." "You thought what he wanted you to think," I replied. "The difference is I stopped believing his stories long ago." As I walked away, I felt nothing but relief. Marcus had taught me to be practical, to always choose the sensible path. He just never expected me to use those lessons against him. The divorce was finalized in record time, with Marcus agreeing to all my terms. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about being angry or vindictive. It's about being smarter, more patient, and yes, more practical than those who try to hurt you. In the end, Marcus and Sophia taught me something valuable. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time, and make sure you have it on camera.